Okay, evening all on playchess.com, and also I'll be streaming this to Twitch. So I thought we could continue looking at the World Championship match of 1935 between Max Euwe and Alexander Alekhine. So we looked at quite a few games already. Let's now look at game 12. So in game 12, Max Euwe was playing white, okay, and he kicked off with d4. So this was played the 29th of October 1935, this game. Okay, so knight f6 was played by Alexander, and we saw a Grunfeld defense. After knight c3 we saw d5, so Grunfeld defense, and this Russian system queen b3. So queen b3 looks perhaps like a strange move using the queen like this. It's to encourage black to release the tension in the centre, and for white to sometimes get a nice pawn centre. The obvious downsides, the queen's being used, it's a very sensitive piece, it's going to be a subject of tempo gain as a downside here. Black goes for this. Alexander plays d takes c4. After queen takes c4, bishop g7. He's already had some success earlier in the match with the Grunfeld. In fact, one game was quite crushing with black. So after e4 here, Alexander castled. Knight f3. And now we see an interesting move which looks like a modern conception. It's a6, and the reason this is already interesting is that in principle a6 weakens the b6 square. It does aggressively prepare b5, and then maybe the bishop can come on this diagonal maybe. But on the other hand, if you play a6, would you expect to play c6 later, because actually you'd be weakening b6? But here's a very interesting idea. After bishop f4, there's some controversy here. It seems that Alexander might have been a little bit drunk at this game. Other people indicate this is entirely intentional, but as far as this next move goes, it has been played a lot and there has been a lot of success with it. This next move which black plays here is to make this a kind of gambit. Forget playing c6. Obviously c5 is a bit ruled out. You can just take two ways perhaps, but black just plays b5, just offering the c7 pawn. Now I think assessments of this game at the time was that it was leading to a hopeless position, but actually this is being played a lot, this gambit. Black should be able to generate, in principle, some compensation for the c7 pawn. It's taken with the queen, and now Alexander, okay, he doesn't take the queens off here. He plays queen e8, which might not be the best move. Maybe it's the follow-up, but the idea of giving up the pawn is interesting. But possibly black could consider taking the queen off here and just playing it like a gambit. It does look quite dangerous. I think if queen takes, let's quickly look at this. You know, maybe black can continue bishop b7, then knight d7, then rook c8, and get some pressure going on the center and the c file. So maybe queen e8 might not be right. So what actually, if you were to evaluate this position, do you think that black's got the potential for any counterplay here, being a pawn down, or is black just a pawn down for nothing? What is your assessment of this position? If I give you 20 seconds to check that out, would you think white's just winning this clearly, or do you think there's some compensation here? What do you think? queen e8 does have some virtue, that, you know, maybe b4, maybe the queen can come out later. Nothing for black. Yeah, I'm not sure queen e8 is the right continuation, but let's go with it. So white played bishop e2. Okay, so is Alexander just playing very badly? Ironmus indicates his opinion. No doubt white must be better here. Okay. So knight c6, which is asking for d5, knight b4. What is the concrete threat? Things get very, very strange now. Very strange indeed. Because after castles, this sort of does seem to imply there's something up with Alexander Alekhine. This looks like a very faulty, very, very faulty combination from, you know, one of the greatest tacticians, combination players in the history of the game. This looks like not the greatest Alexander Alekhine combination here. We see knight takes e4, which, okay, it blows up white's centre and it supports an idea of forking queen bishop. It's a knight for a pawn, 2 pawns, okay, the point's revealed, but white can defend the f4 bishop quite adequately, it seems, with queen c1. So it seems actually white is here a piece up for just a single pawn, believe it or not. And this is 14 moves in to a World Championship match game. 14 moves in. This is quite a rare event, isn't it, really, if you think about it? What is compensation here? If we thought the compensation was nebulous before, how is it here? It's even more nebulous, isn't it? I mean, it does seem white's a piece up. Well, let's see. Bishop f5. Knight goes back to g3. Black does get another forcing move in, but now they're going to run out soon, surely. Rook c8, but hold on. What about c2? Can that be a focal point for coming in? Unfortunately, there's queen d2 hitting the knight on d5. So Alexander doesn't bother with rook c2. This bishop's defended with this knight anyway. So we see knight takes f4. White's still a piece up. Can black take here at least? Well, he doesn't even do that. Maybe, you know, he doesn't like rook d1. He plays actually bishop c2. So we're keeping the threat bishop b2. But it doesn't seem like there's any compensation. It's unbelievable. Queen b4. Protecting b2. Okay. Queen d8. Knight retreats. Trying to get rid of black's bishop pair. Bishop a4. Okay, for the moment b3 is out of the question. Rook e1, and now b3 is renewed as a threat, potentially. Bishop d4. Okay. This sets a little trap or something, surely. If b3, I guess, maybe bishop, there might be a trap here, because otherwise this bishop is trapped. So what would black play here? I think bishop c5 would be nasty. Where would the queen go? Or can it go over here? Nope, maybe not. Bishop c5. So, does anyone know immediately, the tactically aware? In the game, we saw the move knight f3 being played. Okay, attacking this bishop. But what would happen if white did play b3? Does anyone know? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now, and I'll try and work it out as well. How would black respond to this? Anyone? Is there a trap being set here? We can try a5. A few of you are calling for a5. We'll try a5. Okay, so if the queen goes here, yes, there's the check, and we're winning the queen. So we go to a3. Then what? If we go b4, well, we'll just take here. We can, in this position though, we can pin the pawn. I don't know if that's any use. Pin the pawn. Rook c3 is worth a shot, isn't it? Okay, that might be worth a shot. So White instead, well, he didn't go for this b3 move. He just played knight f3, which I guess, you know, he's still attacking this bishop, but it can attack the queen now, which it does. Bishop c5, not giving White time for b3. So queen h4. There's still a threat potentially of b3, but now also knight g5 might be useful. On h7, the bishop comes out anyway to c2. Rook bc1, f6, and it seems here, if White wants to, maybe after this f6 move, well, if he takes here, you know, it'll be two pieces, wouldn't it? That doesn't seem a big deal either. That seems okay. Taking on c2. But in the game, okay, bishop c4 check was played. Bit of a mysterious game, this one. This is winning as well, though, this bishop c4. Because now, after takes, next plays queen takes c4 check, and then the nifty queen takes c2, defending f2. Of course, if he takes with the rook, then we have this tactic again, bishop f2 on the queen. So he takes with the queen. White's still a piece up. It's not, doesn't seem like a high quality game, this one, for a World Championship match game. White being a piece up for not much. Looks like a blitz game, perhaps. So bishop e7, and now, okay, a nifty move here, knight d4, but okay, it's not a majorly advanced tactic. Rook takes c1, rook takes. King h8. White's just a piece up, basically. He's winning very easily, really. He's now threatening knight takes e7 without this being check because of that knight move. I know, it's a disappointing quality game. It's strange, but this is what happened historically. Knight takes e7, rook c8 check, just getting rid of the rooks, and here Alexander resigned. Strange, isn't it? Very strange. This was a World Championship match game. It just seems Alexander wasn't playing too well in a few of these games. So the rumours, you know, he's been drinking a little bit for these games. It just looks bad, but it just so happens that the pawn sacrifice has been played before. If we go back to this definitely has been played before by Grunfeld players with some success. But we need to know the exact follow-up on this idea. Let's look at, or shall we just do a quick overview and summary? So basically, this is a Grunfeld gone wrong, losing the c7 pawn, not much. The way it was followed up, that's the thing. It's the way it was followed up that White just had a very nice centre. Gick says perhaps he underestimates his opponents. Yes, it shows a bit of contempt almost. But what was this about? You know, this piece out here. I mean, I guess it's already a very bad position after knight b4. If this isn't played, then what's to stop white from playing a3 and after knight c2 just rook c1? Where is the knight going when it's on c2? You know, say we give black another idea, any other idea. You know, a3. You know, this is terrible anyway. Okay, so I don't know. This maybe it's just making an already bad position worse. So a piece down, without much compensation, and it even looks as though, you know, this was preparing b3, this rook b1, and for some reason b3 was not played here. Possibly this is the idea, a5 and rook c3 is a complication too far. If queen b2, that, you know, rook takes g3, maybe white wasn't interested in this position for whatever reason. Okay, it looks as though, you know, the queen's in a spot of bother here anyway. So he played, instead of b3, he played knight f3, just attacking that bishop and being content to really get the queen back. This game, for those new to this session, this live stream, is game 12, Max Euwe versus Alexander Alekhine World Championship match 1935. So a surprisingly strange play from Alexander, finding himself a piece down and just making things worse, actually, and worse with f6. I mean, I think taking here is okay as well, but he played check, which neatly simplifies as well. You know, how many pieces does he need to be up in any case? So knight d4 was a neat move, and he's just simplifying now. Knight f1 means knight takes e7 is threatened, and then he's got queen takes c8. We just play this anyway, and here black resigned. Let's swiftly move on. Okay. So the next key decisive game was game 14. So let's have a look at game 14. So in game 14, Max is playing white again, d4, and we see a repeat of this Grunfeld. Is it going to be such a disaster? Things get really strange in the opening here. After bishop f4, we see a very strange move. Knight h5. Knight h5. This is a kind of rebellion against white's style of play or something. So bishop e5, creating some potential weaknesses on the diagonal, because this diagonal is going to be weakened if black plays f6, which he does. So job done, you know, he's weakened that diagonal. Bishop g3, it's like Alexander's playing a shadow of him, of what he's capable of. He's not demonstrating what he's capable of. Maybe, you know, I don't know, maybe he had some personal issues at the time. Knight takes g3, h takes g3, gives white dynamism. So we're going to have moves like rook takes h7 and queen g6 pretty soon. Or if the bishop ends up on d3, same idea. We see c6. Remember, this diagonal is weakened. e3, bishop g7. So the move bishop d3 introduces immediately rook takes h7 and bishop g6 as a tactic. Black castles, and guess what white can play in this position if I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Anyone? Yeah. You can reuse that resource here. Yeah. Okay. I know, it's just a World Championship game. You wouldn't expect a move like Rook takes H7 to be... This looks like a blitz game from one of my chess cube war zones, doesn't it? Rook takes H7 just creates a pin on G6. So Alexander is a pawn down. What does Black play here? Really? What does Black play here? If he plays King takes H7, we would just play check, surely. What does Black play here? If he plays this, he's going to get mated. If he plays King G8, Bishop takes G6, threatening mate. What happens here? Rook E8. He can lose the rook. Just take the rook. Why not just take the rook? Seems okay. What a disaster. Black's just lost the pawn around his king for nothing. Alexander's not playing at full strength. That is very, very clear. Max Euwe is contrasting to Alexander, not as colourful. He's a family guy. His play is cold, crystal clear, logical, and Alexander seems to be playing in a reckless manner here. F5 is played. Okay, F5. He's just lost a pawn around his king. He's making it into some sort of gambit. The rook goes back, and now we see E5. Okay, is this really justifying Black's play? D takes E5, and now developing with tempo on attacking the bishop. Now Black plays now Bishop takes C3 check. So Black is weakening some squares around his king even further, the dark squares. Queen F6, okay, C3 is under fire, no big deal. Max can leave that to be taken with C takes D5. It's only a pawn. Queen takes C3 check, King F1. And it looks very dangerous for Black. The queen goes back. Now, let's have a look. If C takes D here, I think we have all sorts of things. Well, basically, Rook C1 to C7 would join forces with this rook on H7, for example. Actually, that's a bit similar to what's going to happen anyway. So we see Queen F6 and we see Rook C1 anyway. We see this idea pan out in any case. So C takes D5, Rook C7. The rooks are coordinating on H7. It's Alekhine, Alexander Alekhine at his very worst. Very worst, I would say. He's got another terrible position here. Bishop B5, putting more pressure on D7 and also on D5. The queen comes to protect D5. Now a very good move though in the circumstances. A very good move from White. How does White want the rook? He wants the rook here. What does White play here? So if I give you 20 seconds here, can you guess what Max Euwe played in this position? 20 seconds starting from now. Your challenge is to get the rook over here. How? Queen D4 actually looks good from MC. Queen D4 looks good on H7 potentially. Is it needed? You're giving up a rook. It's a bit nebulous, isn't it? Or is it a forced mate? Is it nebulous? Queen takes C7. How would you follow up? I mean, possibly it's crushing as well. Possibly, it looks fairly crushing in the circumstances. But no, there's a clearer move that is played. Okay, just rook C4, making use of this pin, and the rook can come over here. That's good fun, isn't it? Rook C4. So we see knight F6, rook CH4. Okay, so the rooks are now doubled simply on h8. We see queen c5. The bishop doesn't mind this sort of maneuver to target d5. Bishop a4. Okay, queen c3 is played. Knight g5. So closing a net around the king. f7 guarded now. King g7. And now removing this defensive knight is quite useful. So we see the move. Well, in fact, I mean, it looks also in this position as though this might be tempting, but Max is not interested. He just plays knight h7, just calmly, you know, removing the defensive knight. So the rook moves, and now knight takes f6, which is very, very dangerous, of course. If queen takes f6, then rook h7 looks crushing. It looks unbearable, this position. So king takes f6 looks terrible as well after rook h7. Okay, we see bishop e6, and the other rook comes in, and in theory there seems, you know, queen h5, but you know, might be concerned about queen c1, queen h5, queen h4. So bishop f7 is played. King g1. So maybe the king can come to h2 now after, say, queen h5 might be possible. But there's also another idea. After rook g8, there's another attacking idea made use of here, which is to play g4. So g4 simply threatens g takes, and then maybe, you know, king takes, well, queen f3, or just rook takes f7. Black's getting torn apart, surely. So he defends f7, bishop, with rook g7. G takes f5 is played anyway. Okay, leaving still a rook on the 7th rank. And in this position, now bishop b3. So on d5, that's protected with queen e5. Queen f3. Maybe this is going to be useful. Queen h3 to h4. Also eyeing d5. Rook c8. And now g4, giving the king potentially g2 if there's a check. Bishop g6. Offering the b7 pawn, and that is taken. Check. And now this looks dangerous. Rook h8, threatening nasty stuff, but it's white's move, and he's got forcing moves at his disposal, which are quite good actually. So the first forcing move is g5 check. Okay, so that has to be taken. Another forcing move, queen f4. Another forcing move, queen d6. Not too many choices for black. Now a very good move, f4 check, blocking the rook. Because if king g4, then queen takes g6. So the king has to go on the h file. And now the final move played is queen e7, threatening not just queen g7 but also maybe queen g7. Here Alexander resigns. He's got nothing. Crushed. Crushed. It's Alexander not playing that well. So let's just review this game again. So he got beaten up quite badly here with this opening experiment not being amazing. So f6, okay, he's got weaknesses already, and there's dynamism already for white on the h file. Okay, so yes, he just loses a pawn here for not much, and white is just playing very simple moves. Okay, there's a pawn sacrifice, which is good, but white's already got a great position. The pawn sacrifice helps this c file, being used. Okay, so rook c1. We saw the rooks trying to join forces, and then joining forces with rook c4. Okay, so doubling rooks on h8. Okay, so queen c3 here. The attack continues, so the defensive piece is removed. Step 1. Step 2 is getting the rook on the 7th and the 6th. Step 3, improving king a little bit, just in case king h2 is needed if the queen ventures. And then simply the king is just peeled open. Just peeled open with this g4. And there's another g4 on the way to attack f5. It also gives the king a nice square g2, of course. So black's threatening something which is just responded with a series of forcing moves now. Check, 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 and then queen e7, crushing. There's one spike check available. It's not even worth, the king will just go there, so what? End of game. So this is really Alexander Alekhine at his worst at the moment, or made to look really bad. Let's have a look at another. Now this is a more interesting game perhaps. Alexander playing white in this one. Sorry, black. Pardon me. Alexander playing black again. This is game 16 of the 1935 World Championship match. In game 16, we saw actually a Slav defense being tried, and we have here after e3 an early bishop f5, which is possible in this position, it would seem. C takes, and then knight c3. Okay, d5 reinforced. You might think, well, b7. What about attacking b7? In this particular position, I'm not entirely sure that it's absolutely brilliant to play queen b3, but it is played. Okay, because the bishop's over there. Why not? It's protected. Okay, bishop d2, which looks like a good idea. Why not try and attack the queen on c8? Knight c6 or c1. Okay, bishop e7 is played. And obviously bishop b5, pinning the knight. And maybe white can use the c5 square. Black castles, white castles. Queen d8. Okay, white tries to make use of that c5 square now with knight a4. Knight a5 attacking the queen, and tempting white to give up the dark square bishop, actually, which he does. What is the alternative? For the queen to stumble back? Not really sure. Okay about that. So white gives up the dark square bishop. Is that going to be a problem? Well, he's hoping that this will be good. Knight c5. Alexander just snaps that off, giving back the bishop straight away. Now, in this position, d takes c5 is played. D takes c5. You might think, well, hold on a sec. Why not rook takes c5? Possibly a good move for black here would be knight e4, just hitting that rook. That might be nice, and then maybe if the rook has to go back, maybe a move like bishop g4, and then knight d2 might be threatening a fork. So maybe this is unpleasant a little bit already. So okay, d takes c5 is played, which does give white potentially knight d4 and then maybe c6 It looks tempting. We see knight e4 anyway. Okay, and white tries to get rid of the queens now. So queen a4. The queens are taken off. But is e5 a bit of a liability? It's attacked with rook fc8. Dissolved now with c6. So takes rook ab8. Black has a little bit of pressure. Now Alekhine playing white, sorry, playing black, has a respectable position here. He's not a pawn down, he's not material down, his rooks are nice. I'd say black's in a nice way at the moment. And white decides to give black b2, maybe in exchange for d5 potentially with knight d4. So he's threatening knight takes and bishop takes potentially. So that's the idea. But Alexander doesn't mind. He doesn't mind. He takes on b2. So we see this knight takes f5 and bishop takes d5. Black has active rooks for the moment. And plays actually knight c3, threatening immediately knight e2 check. Okay. But the knight is pinned to c8. So white sidesteps with king h1, knowing the knight's pinned. g6. Bishop b3. And now rook c5 gives black some options. If he wants now, black can play knight e4 and he's on f2 with the rook and knight. Now knight e4 is extinguished with this next move f3, so keeping the knight out of e4. But is Alexander better here? He plays a5, which looks good, you know, get the bishop out of that nice spot. e4 is played here, trying to drum up something maybe against f7. Black doesn't need to do anything like that at the moment. He kicks the bishop to d5. And now a neat little move. The rook simply goes back to b5. Okay, with the threat now of knight takes d5 with the rook protected. So the rook's protecting that, so knight takes d5 is on the cards here. But no, black has double pawn, so even if he wins a pawn, is it going to be that significant? h3 is played, and the king improves with king g7. He's in no rush to take on d5 here. After rook c2, knight takes d5. We get black now being a pawn up, but it's double pawns. So black's a pawn up with an advanced a pawn here. Okay, rook f2, and now this is great. This is great endgame technique, I think. So black improves the position with king f6, gets the king quite aggressive. Build bridge here, rook e5, rook e3. So the king can now walk along the dark squares potentially. King h2, but rook a3. Okay, king comes to e5. Rook d2. Now h6, as though maybe, you know, this kind of thing is useful. h4 preventing g5, but now we see h5. Still f4 might be useful, but it's pinned. That pawn is pinned, so f4 is a constant threat to bear in mind as well. Check. Now king f4. Okay, we see f6 being played here. Rook c2, king d5. Here white looks to be in trouble. If he plays another check, well, the king's just going to come down. You know, this pawn's vulnerable. He plays g3. Okay, now g3, it's like weakness in the last move. This f3 is a bit looser. So Alexander, he's got a spare pawn here to use, and he uses it. He plays g5 check. So after HG, FG, okay. You know, he's going to try and win these two. Rook takes F3. He's on G3. That's protected. Now we see King D4 offering H5, which is taken. For F4, dissolve this pawn over here. Okay. So it's equal on pawns, but this king's just so far away. This king's just ready to get this pawn. So we see check. Okay, this king's just cut off from his pawn. Okay, keeping the opposition for the white king. Check, driving the king back. What? Sorry, what about king takes F5 instead of king G5? I think there was rook takes F3 check. We'll go back to that in a moment. Let's just see how this finishes. Okay, so we see the king coming across to that pawn. Any check here? You know, king B2 will be on A2, and okay, this A pawn isn't enough. Bridge built, A3. Now it looks clear that A2, A1, but here, okay, a final try. Well, just rook C3 check, and that you know, there's rook C2 to H2. So here, actually, white resigned. You know, if say king B2, then A2. Okay, it's trivially won, it seems. Okay, now, so the question of king takes F5 instead of king G5 earlier. Let's just quickly go back there. King takes F5. Hold on a sec. So if king takes F5, I think we just have rook takes F3 check. And the king's in a worse state here. If, you know, it's worse than the game at the moment. I think that's going to be easy as well. Is that okay, Buat? I hope that answers the question. Does it? So okay, let's go and quickly review this game. So Alexander seems to be back to his normal self in this game. He played a reasonably strong game. He didn't give up any pieces for nothing. He got the dark square bishop just to give it up dynamically for active pieces here in this position. Active rooks, which translated into, well, this position's good with the knight. Nice dangerous threat here. Knight E2 check. Nice rook C5, so that knight E4 is possible. This rook on the 7th and the knight is not bad on C3 here. And A2 is constantly a problem, potentially. Okay, so rook BB5. Where is the bishop going? If it you know, it's got nowhere to go. You know, A2 is going to be under fire. So he wins a pawn here and displays good technique to win this endgame. So the king's just coming in. G5 check, neat. Simplify a bit over there. And then come back for the A pawn. So it was good technique being demonstrated, I think, in this game by Alexander. Okay, bridge building. And okay, final check. Okay, let's have a look at one more game. So in game 19, Alekhine was playing white. Game 19. So in game 19, okay, so we see d4, and we get a Slav defense being played by Max over this time. So very popular even back then, 1935, Slav defense. With d takes c4 here, white tries to discourage b5, protecting the pawn. This does weaken the b4 square though. e6, e4, bishop b4. Okay, threatening knight takes e4. Alexander plays now e5, and after knight e4 we see queen c2, really threatening queen takes e4 now. And okay, Max plays queen d5, so he seems to be holding up his extra pawn as well for a moment. A little bit greedy maybe, this position. Okay, bishop e2. Now an ambitious move to undermine white's centre with c5. c5 provides a nice square for the knight as well to undermine the centre. White just castles here, so he's really threatening the queen now. The knight's taken, and now we see a seemingly clever move from Max. C takes d4, not minding taking, maybe because of d3. If takes d3, and that would be interesting. So Alexander in this position plays actually c takes d4, and he's got now a threat on the c pawn, and behind that is the bishop, which is loose. And we see here after c3 a seemingly, you know, quite a good move, considering the loose bishop on c8. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 20 seconds starting from now. What does white play in this position? Anyone? White to play. Okay, nearly. Bishop e2 was mentioned. Bishop d2 is the one. So just making use of that pin on c8. So he's going to try and regain his pawn. The pawn is protected with queen a5 for a moment. But we see a nifty move here. Bishop takes c3. Just using this pressure. Okay, now rook a3 is made use of. So the bishop can't move without losing c8. Why rook a3? Why not say, you might think rook c1. Okay. Well, rook a3 is interesting. It makes it will be nicer maybe to take with the rook, okay, than the queen, and then that's a nicer battery maybe to have on the c file. So we see that battery. Knight c6. Yeah, and he doesn't want to exchange queens either. So okay. So rook takes c3. So white still has pressure. Bishop d7. And this looks nice. White's pressure looks nice. Again, he's got active rooks. Like in the game we just saw Alexander with black having active rooks, he's got very nice rooks here. So maybe we can say when Alexander is on his game, he takes care of his rooks. He makes sure they're nice. So he's got nice pressure on b7. So after castles, rook c5, kicking the queen and winning a pawn now. Okay, the tables are really turning on black. There's also a threat of rook takes c6 now, or rook takes d7, and then rook takes c6. So bishop c8. Black is in trouble, surely. Or is he going to win d4 back? d4. Well, rook b1. He does win d4 back at a price, at a big price. This bishop trait, this rook, this is loose. Knight takes d4, and whoops, bishop f3 on the rook. Ouch! White's just won the exchange. He's just won the exchange. He had pressure though. I mean, he had pressure from the opening, and he's going to be the exchange up now against Max Euwe. Okay, so bishop d7. It looks bad to be exchanged down here. Okay, Max plays on though. Queen e4. Okay, if rook takes d7, then queen e1. Clearly the back row. So queen c4, kicking queen or asking it to be protected. The exchange up. Then he makes some space for his king. So he's really finding rook takes d7 now. So how does he convert this? Check. Rook c8. Check. Rook e2. King comes to g3. Well, it doesn't look as though it should be that complicated, but there's quite a few more moves here. Check. Rook c7. Offering g2 is that little bit of counterplay for black being offered. Takes on f7. Check. 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 Black is still the exchange down, but with a lot of checks available, which he makes use of. And there is this loose pawn now as well to attack. F4. So he's threatening now fg, and maybe taking this bishop. So that's taken. Rook takes. Okay, and now there seems to be two threats. One to mate the black king, and one on the bishop here. Bishop e2 makes sure that at least check. There's bishop h5. Okay, but there's a check here. And now king d2. So the bishop's trying to be kicked off this defensive diagonal. It goes to c4, and now we see rook g7. Well, it does seem hopeless, the exchange down. h6 is now on the way for dropping, it seems. So h6 is one. White's a pawn up as well. How long can black survive here? Alexander doesn't mind any discovery check here. The king wants to walk on maybe the dark squares. Check. Or back this way, e3. Sort of mating that for the king here or something. Bishop d5. Check. King f4. So it looks as a mating net's been woven. Rook g5, rook h6, that would be mating. Rook h8 trying to defend. We see simply h4 now. And black now just resigns. He got done over. Max Euwe got done over. He had a lot of pressure to deal with that. If he takes, we get this mate here. If he doesn't take, well, it looks pretty hopeless anyway. He's going to run out of moves, and it looks hopeless. I think actually just king g3 and then rook g5 will be mating. So say a6, I think we just play king g3 here, and there's the threat of rook g5. Okay, that was a wonderful game. Let's have a quick look at what happened there to black. Why did black get into so much trouble here in game 19? Max Euwe playing the Slav. He won a pawn. Maybe he tried a bit too hard. to hang on to it. Okay, so we see bishop e2, castle. An interesting conception from black, c takes d4. Okay, but now this whole c file is being exposed. c8 is a problem. So we saw bishop d2, white's just getting back the pawn by force tactically, just using the c file pressure. Okay. In getting back the pawn, you might think, well, did black have to lose b7? Why did he have to lose b7? After bishop d7, rook b1, well, what does black do about b7? I mean, say he played a move like rook b8. Maybe there's rook takes c6 here. Takes? I don't know, 3 pieces for the queen? Is that any good? Or maybe stronger. Maybe there's a more clear-cut line. On rook b8, what do you think about this? Is this rubbish, or is this a good idea? What would you play here? Would you agree with rook takes c6? 3 pieces for the queen. Evaluation, please. What do you think about this? Is this any good? Actually, they don't seem that coordinated. Someone's saying, okay, yes. Wow. Rook takes b7 is also interesting. Bishop b5. I think bishop b5. What if we just castle? There's also rook c5. Now on castling there's bishop c6. No, there isn't. Hold on a sec. Rook c5. If the queen goes back. Don't know. Interesting. So he plays after bishop d7, rook b1. We saw castling from Max Euwe. So rook b8. There doesn't look to be an immediate refutation, is there? I'll give you all 20 seconds to shout out an immediate refutation if you want. 20 seconds starting from now. For white's play, does white have anything really big here? This is mentioned by 2 of you now. Buert play chess, rook c5 followed by d5, and now Camp Dog stream rook c5 and d5. So let's have a look at rook c5 and d5. So the queen would go back here. We'll go with d5. Right, this looks dangerous. Takes, rook takes. This looks dangerous. If queen e7, interesting. It still looks, I mean, good. I mean, okay, maybe Max didn't like this. He didn't like it for whatever reason. Rook d1. Pardon me. Rook d1. If we play rook d1 here, bishop e6, bishop e6, Still, it might be okay for white. You know, he's got a nice position. You know, white's got a nice position. Maybe, you know, maybe something like bishop d3 on h7. Okay. So in the game we see more committal, just losing a pawn. Like this. It looks as though black crumbled actually with this continuation. He just ended up losing the exchange very shortly from here. So he has to do something about c6 in any case. So he wins this pawn, but this diagonal is unfortunate. And okay, he plays on, but ultimately, you know, he played on most of the game, the exchange down, without too much compensation. I'm not sure we need to carry on from here to review this game. It just looks like the exchange down. Okay, really interesting games. Maybe Alexander Alekhine is below par in some of these games that we've seen. The evidence would seem to point that way. Okay, I hope you got something interesting out of it, having a look at these games this week. Maybe we'll have a look maybe at different players next week. Maybe Kasparov, back to Kasparov next week for a bit of variety, and I resume this match later on. But I hope you got something out of it this week. And okay, so see you next week. Okay, thanks for coming. Thanks very much. Thanks for coming. Okay, so see you next week.